Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Today on the show, we have the Secretary General of MCA, Datuk Chong Sin Woon. He is the chairman of the Port Klang Authority. He has been so for the past 1 year. And he was also the second Deputy Education Minister from July of 2015 to May of 2018. Now, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hi, nice to
All
meet you
right,
again.
so if I may begin with a look at the current political landscape, there's been a lot of discussion about the future of Malaysian politics. Many are expecting non-traditional realignments of the political parties in order to secure government. So MCA, whose association with UMNO and MIC goes back to the fight for independence, it now finds itself a junior partner in a coalition that styles itself as a Malay Muslim government. Now, I'm wondering, how does MCA plan to position itself going forward?
Well, MCA has always been a core party in the coalition of Barisan Nasional before. Like what you just mentioned, that we are now a junior partner in the Pakatan National, which happened by coincidence after the falling of Pakatan Harapan. If you remember that during the resign of Dr. Mahathir, MCA was the first party to suggest that we should dissolve the parliament and go for a general election. We do not have that pandemic at that time, but it was rejected by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. So we have no choice but to choose a prime minister. To cut it short, that we found ourselves the only having one minister and also the only Chinese minister in the current cabinet. We have been asked many times as a very a small number of representatives of non-Malay in this cabinet, what would the future of the non-Muslim in this country? I have shared this many times that if you look into the last or the previous government with DAP having the strong support of the Chinese, having 42 parliamentarians and 6 full ministers in the cabinet, it really didn't even get through the promises that they have promised to the voters, especially to the Chinese voters. But Kassiong, as the only Chinese minister now in the cabinet, he has full attention. We thought that we are very weak, but in turn, they asked a lot to Kassiong on the opinion and their respect, and they wanted to make this government as fair as possible. That's what we get from Kassiong's report to the MCA. Well, the MCA have suffered a defeat for the since 2008. We have been reducing 50% of MP every single general election. We're down to 1 and now increased to 2 after the by-election of Tanjung Piai. MCA has since tried so many reforms to rebuild the party. We know it's not going to be easy task. As a big party, a veteran party like MCA, reforming, transforming is a big thing. It's a long journey. It started since then, and then Tiong Lai and then Kassiong, we are still pushing for more reform. You wouldn't see those reforms because still within the party, but I hope that all the reform that we are making now is to set a new platform for the younger generation of MCA leaders to take off in the coming general election and way forward.
So, if I could interject at this point, and I take your point about some of the specific Pakatan promises to the voters, especially Chinese voters on the UEC, for instance. There was, of course, that task force during the Pakatan period that was handed in just as the Pakatan Harapan government fell. But we'll come back to that later. I do want to ask you this. Some of the paradoxes that you seem to be pushing here, which is that despite being having small, insignificant representation in cabinet, yet the cabinet seems to be responsive to the MCA. Now, the question really is, in the current fight between UMNO and Bersatu, and the prospects that Perikatan as a coalition might not survive going into the next general election, where will the MCA stand? Will it stand with Barisan Nasional, Muafakat Nasional, Perikatan Nasional, any of those combinations? What appeals to you?
If you follow MCA news, the MCA has decided since the Kasiong took over that we're going to remain with Barisan Nasional. So recently we just conducted our AGM, and during the opening speech, our president reinstated that we are going to stick together with Barisan Nasional. It's very clear. So we are not looking.
But there's very little left of Barisan Nasional at this point in time. The question is, what will you do when UMNO also is in a coalition purportedly still ongoing with PAS, which when PAS itself seems much more attracted to Bersatu as a party, a coalition partner. What happens to Barisan Nasional, in fact, going forward?
Well, Barisan Nasional stick with Barisan Nasional. We have 4 component party, being UMNO, MCA, MIC, and PBRS from Sabah. Muafakat Nasional is a discussion group between UMNO and PAS. It didn't involve Barisan Nasional. Perikatan Nasional is the government formed by the current many others party in Perikatan. Is just supporting the government, not the Perikatan Nasional as a political coalition.
What do you make then of the reports that UMNO is in early negotiations with PKR? Where does that leave MCA?
Well, there are many reports about UMNO negotiating with PKR. They are in talking with DAP, all sort of reports. The obvious one was when they tried to form a government in Perak. But it was made us very clear during the Supreme Council meeting, which we held every month, that it's very clear that the Barisan Nasional or UMNO have declared during the meeting that they will not work with PKR or DAP. That's very clear. And Barisan Nasional is very clear on that.
Sin Woon, it also seems at this point in time that the current government plays up or plays into particular sentiments. We see now these attempts to, impose fines on people who go to pubs and restaurants. I don't know if you think this is simply a PAS agenda or one that broadly tries to consolidate Malay or conservative Malay votes behind the Perikatan. All the result of which is that civil liberties and personal liberties are under attack in Malaysia today. What is the MCA's position on this?
I don't understand why finding 10,000 is some kind of like PAS agenda, but nevertheless we
on the pubs and on clubs, right?
Okay, pubs and clubs are also closed down in many countries, Western countries as well. We know that it's very difficult to have social distancing when you are having your drinks in the pub. So no particular on PAS agenda on that. It's purely pandemic. Same goes to many entertainment center. Back to the question that about the fine of 10,000 that create row among the people. Our president have brought this into the cabinet. That is why we saw this Takiuddin and also Ismail Sabri have came out with this new guideline that down to 1,500 for a simple kind of against the SOP. We are against it. We think that the way that the team or any authority giving summons to those who didn't wear a mask just because they are starting to eat or they are having a smoke at the roadside or whatever those minor kind of against SOP, you shouldn't fine 10,000. So I think we have brought our voice into the cabinet. We think that this should be amended, and we are happy to see that there have changes that.
So if I'm not mistaken, MCA recently celebrated its 72nd anniversary, right? You had that along with your AGM a few weeks ago. I'm wondering the kinds of conversations that are happening internally within the party, particularly among your base. Now, and I'm glad that you pointed out in terms of self-reflection within the party that there's been a reduction of performance or poor performance in every election since 2008. What kinds of conversations are you having internally within the party? Do the base see MCA leadership as speaking out against acts of ethno-chauvinism within this current government that styles itself as a Malay Muslim administration?
No, that wasn't in discussion during the AGM. MCA has always played a role, and we with all the experience that we have in the government for the past 60 years, we think that the cabinet is the last resort to resolve most of the things, and I think that cabinet discussion and decision is the utmost important platform to solve most of the problem faced by us or any Malaysian. So
when you had the AGM a few weeks ago, what was the main you talked about reforming the party, that there's been a push for more reforms, right? I want to understand the types of conversations that are being had within MCA members. What are in terms of taking stock of where this party is at right now?
2 weeks ago, we had our AGM 2 weeks ago. The major focus of the debate by the delegates on three important issues. The first is the fighting of pandemic. People also raise about how the government do the SOP that affect the livelihood of the people, the economic issues. Secondly, about vaccination. If you know that the MCA had been very actively on the ground to help people to register themselves for the vaccination. By far, the last report that I received 3 days ago, we registered about 14,000 people on the ground throughout Peninsula, including Sabah. There's a lot of work for us to help the government to get more people to register, especially those senior citizen, MCO that cannot go back to hometown. So the senior citizens are staying alone, or even if they have smartphone, they wouldn't know how to register themselves. So fighting the pandemic and the vaccination is two main objective. Main discussion during the AGM. The third one will be how to rebuild the economy. We think that.
That's a very interesting question. I do want, in the last minute or so that we have for this segment, I just want to ask you about the future of the party, because in the past, MCA's ability to shape national policy was based on its own electoral success. Without that electoral success, we now see the Bornean parties, the parties of Sabah and Sarawak, actually playing that moderating role, that role that, so now we've had a bipartisan statement coming out from MPs from Sabah and Sarawak against the attempt for this government to continue to appeal against the Allah, decision. So for your membership, do they see MCA actually being able to do this, whereas we actually, in a national level, see Sabah and Sarawak parties doing much better in this role?
Of course, as you mentioned, that we only have very little representative in the parliament. We only have two. In the cabinet, we only have one. So in the time when MCA was strong, the strongest we had was during the time when we had 31 member of parliament, 4 full minister. And at that time, we are working very well with Sabah and Sarawak parliamentarian to balance the government, to make sure that this country goes on the middle ground. We do not go extreme. So, but now that very weakened MCA, we do not have that power like before. So obviously and very automatically that the MP from Borneo are taking the lead now, and we share it together with them. So I think they are always an important force in Malaysian politics to make sure that we stay in the middle ground, that we do not go to any extreme, whatever policy that we make.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a quick break on the show, but let's come back and continue this conversation. I do want to touch on several things, how you've seen the country deal with the pandemic. And I want to come back and continue this conversation. Please stay on the line. Sin Woon will come back and touch on those points. We will be right back with you on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our conversation with Datuk Chong Sin Woon, who from July 2015 to May 2018 held the office of Second Deputy Education Minister. So I want to come back and touch on something you said, that during the recent AGM, the recent MCA AGM, many things were discussed, such as the pandemic management, vaccine rollout, and economic recovery. I wanted to ask you, because you held this portfolio of Deputy Education Minister, if you've been following closely the impact of the pandemic management on education, what has been your assessment of how the way we've managed this pandemic has impacted school children in the past year?
Well, I think the impact was huge towards the students as well as the teachers, the whole education sector. My personal opinion from day one, as I study what was the policy made by UK. UK also one of the most impacted pandemic country in the world. They do also lock down, they close down factory, they close down businesses, but they did not close down school from day one. Education continue. That is why I always make a joke with my friends during the MCO when we started last year today, that there's only two things that is non-essential in the country. One is entertainment, the other one is education. So how can we lock down schools? Of course, you can close down entertainment. We can bear with it, but education is not something that we can stop. And I think that Malaysia, we do not have the condition to have online study. First, our data line is very poor still. In Kuala Lumpur, you couldn't even get a proper 4G, not to say the outskirts and Borneo, or even interior part of Semenanjung, Malaysia. And not to mention about having the laptop, computer, they are able to connect to internet. Not to forget about family with 3 or 4 students need to go online at the same time. So I think that.
So were we wrong, Sin Woon? I mean, so was the government wrong in shutting down the schools? I know they made an effort to get the DTV going, but it took them a year to do so.
Exactly.
Just of opening the schools. I mean, it seems really odd. I mean, what's your position on this?
That's why, as I said earlier, that we do not have the ability, we do not have that condition to go online. We are not ready for that. We are never think of having online education. Unlike other international schools, they are pretty well preparing for students for online. Of course, they have less students and more better facilities. So I think that from the very beginning, the world has been, the WHO has advised us to live with the pandemic, that we need to get along. We cannot just lock everybody in the house. We cannot stop everybody or all the activities. So I think my personal opinion is we should restart the school and follow the SOP.
Can I ask you, Sin Woon, did you have any discussions of the like with Ma Hang Soon, who is one of the deputy education ministers, also your party comrade. I believe he's currently the deputy president of MCA. Did you have any conversations with him, about what, to give some of this input that we've seen in the past year?
No, this is purely my personal opinion, because I know when I was deputy minister, I know all kind of hindrance or problem or issue they need to handle. It's easy to say than done. So this is purely on my personal opinion. I know it's very easy for us to talk. Go back to school, open up, wash your hand, and things will go as normal. But during the height of the pandemic, or during the beginning of the pandemic, we are in a very fear kind of environment. So now that after a year, we know about this COVID, and we know how to handle it, we know how to control it. I think we are more matured, we are more ready to reopen our school.
Right.
But we should, if you ask me, in my personal opinion, that we should continue opening up our schools, even if there are minor here and there cases where students or teachers are having positive COVID-19, because education just cannot stop, and we do not have that facility and that condition to carry on online.
Yeah, Simon, in fact, it is the wisdom that, schools should have been the last to close and the first to open. Nevertheless, I want to just pick up on the UEC question, because that, you might not give credit to the Pakatan Harapan government for putting together that task force that had many stakeholder conversations led by Edin Khoo, I believe. Is this current government going to pick up where the Pakatan ended in terms of recognition of the Chinese school system and its education certificates?
Okay, first of all, I do not know about that committee, the so-called report. They are supposed to be submitted much earlier, much earlier before the collapse of Pakatan Harapan. So if you follow that issue, even the chairman of the committee say what the former Deputy Minister Teo Ni Ching said was not correct, that they are asking her to join and give advice to the committee on recognition of UEC. I can only share my part during when I was the Deputy Minister and during Barisan Nasional. We had much discussion for recognizing UEC together with a lot of party. So we actually prepared the whole set of things. So both sides, Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan, also pledged in the manifesto to recognize UEC. But of course we lost, so we couldn't even have the power to execute it. But Pakatan Harapan, who took over and promised, their promise is to make it happen within a year. The first year, at first they say the first 100 days, then they say they need some time, okay. Then they say they'll do it at the end of the year, okay. But it still dragged on and dragged on. It didn't happen. With that kind of support, over 95% of Chinese voted them, with 42 member of parliament and 6 full minister. I think they failed.
Right. Well, Sin Woon, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really do appreciate your time. And since you did bring up Teo Ni Ching, we just want to make a point that actually we're going to be speaking with her tomorrow night to your successor to the office of Deputy Education Minister. So we will be speaking to Teo Ni Ching tomorrow night. Make sure you join us for that same time tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time tonight and joining us on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.